yes, welcome everyone to GeoHug. So before we kick off today's session, I'd just like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands which we're all coming from today. I'm here on the beautiful lands of the Gadigal of the people of the Aurora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. So I'm thrilled to have Janine Herzig with us today. So Janine has an impressive career, and to name just a few, she's the Executive President and Director of CEEC International, founder of MetVal Consulting, convener of the Met Planck Conference Series, and former Director and immediate past President of the AusIMM. So Janine is striving to assist the resources sector globally to reduce the impact of mining operations on the environment and communities. And it is going to be absolutely amazing hearing from her today about creating value in the resources sector with a multidisciplinary approach. So it is going to be an amazing session. I hope you all enjoy it. Please use the chat. We'll be opening up the floor and having discussions at the end. And yes, thank you so much, Janine, for joining. It's amazing having you.
So absolutely wonderful to be here. And I'll just acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Kaurna people and acknowledge their strong connection to the land, sea, and all surrounding country. So this is not a technical talk today. So we're just going to have a bit of fun. I'm just going to walk you through some aspects of my career and really just highlight how at various stages over the last 30 or so years, I've seen the value that multidisciplinary groups can bring, and that we really need the multidisciplinary approach to solve the real challenges that we face as an Earth. So hence the title of my talk, We Can't Do It Alone. And I felt that really fitted nicely with Humanity United in Geology. I think it's all about being united and all working on things together. For those of you who were fortunate to see Steve Hill's Essington Lewis presentation last night in Adelaide or online, we did live stream it. He covered a few sort of similar themes about how trust was so important, how connection to country, connection to each other is also important, and basically talked about bringing our best self to everything that we do in life and listening actively to others. So a lot of sort of common themes that I'll be touching on today. Hopefully Steve is online. He did say he was going to be there, but I haven't had a good look at the list of people who were there. But a shout out to Steve if he's there. It was a fantastic lecture. So moving on. So this is where it all started for me. I grew up in Toowoomba. Many of you may or may not know of Toowoomba. It's a relatively small country town in Queensland, known for its Carnival of Flowers. Definitely not known for its mining industry, that's for sure. Very rural community. And my parents grew up on a farm, and that was all I knew. So I really had no idea at all about the mineral sector. And there's kind of a couple of things that I'll touch on as well, is how things happen in your life where you can either turn left or turn right, or make certain decisions that ultimately will really influence where you end up, and can have both positive and negative impacts on your life. So being born and raised in Toowoomba, I loved maths and science, so engineering seemed like a good idea. But I had no idea about mining engineering or metallurgical engineering. So I left Toowoomba to go to university. There was no university in those days in Toowoomba. So I went to Brisbane at the age of 16 and got into a share house with some other students and kind of lived off 2-minute noodles and did all that kind of stuff. Rode my bike to uni in the rain every day, and then to KFC at night for my part-time job. And in first year, we did a bit of all sorts of engineering, and I really enjoyed the materials engineering, the material science that we did. And I love thermodynamics and a few other bits and pieces. So in the second year, I actually enrolled in chemical engineering. A few weeks into that degree, someone from the mining department came around. It was the head of department, Albin Lynch, the very famous, now dearly departed Albin Lynch. And he spoke about scholarships. So instantly I got quite excited about that, and I applied, and I ended up getting them at Mount Isa Mine Scholarship, which was the big one. That was the one that everybody wanted to get. So it was incredibly fortunate. And that really set me up then. So a couple of photos there just from the early days. So the one on the top left there is the mining games, which are now run through the AusIMM and are national games. But in those days, we used to run them at UQ. And we occasionally had some interstate people, but it was really largely a UQ event. And there I am with my mining engineer friend there, who was about 3 foot taller than me, as you can see. But we made a great drill team there. Of course, health and safety. I'm sure we wouldn't get away with wearing shorts anymore doing that type of thing. And then on the top right, I'm at the Kalgoorlie nickel smelter, where I did some vacation work. And some of the people in that photo I still know today. So there's Eric Grimsey, who went on to be the chair of the ethics committee for the AusIMM for many, many years. And Arthur Hunt up the back, who is still a good friend, and he's back in South Australia as well, and went on to go to Olympic Dam. And there I am in Mount Isa with one of the chemical engineering friends that I did vacation work with there. So changing from chem-eng to mineral processing really was a huge decision, but really a fantastic decision for me. So went from, I think there were around 65, 70 graduates in my year in chem-eng. And there were 3 of us in mineral processing. So we did start with 15, but they gradually dropped off. They either went to mining engineering or civil, and we kind of dwindled over time. But from the minute I stepped onto a mine site, I was hooked. Vacation work for me was just cemented everything that I'd sort of learnt in the practical work that we'd done and in the experimental mine at UQ, which we were really fortunate to have there in Indooroopilly. I made it to the end and graduated. And I'm there with my mum and dad. I was the first person in my family to finish school. So everybody, the most that they got to was year 10. So going to university was a big thing in our family for me to have done. And my brother and sister also didn't finish school. But when I later looked at this photo from our graduation night, and it had honestly never struck me before that I was the only girl in the department. And it wasn't until I looked at this photo and went, geez, they're all blokes, So they were a terrific bunch. So that was the mining and met department in that year. So they are mostly mining engineers. And many of them are still really good friends. But, things have really changed since then. That's for sure. There are obviously a lot more women getting into both the sciences and the various engineering degrees, which is a great thing. But I had a wonderful time at university, all things considered. And then I moved on. I did go back to ISA and spent a few years in the lead zinc concentrator there, which I loved, and in the heavy medium plant. And that was probably the first time I really got exposed to some multidisciplinary approach. So we introduced, while I was there in number 2 concentrator, once every couple of weeks, the metallurgists and the mining engineers would get together with the geos. We would go underground and we would actually look at where the mining activity was going to be focused, which stopes they'd be pulling from that week, and look at the mineralogy as well, and actually try and predict, what we would end up getting through the concentrator and then through the smelter after that. So that worked really well. And in those days, MIM had a fantastic technical library, which was just an amazing resource. Things like that don't exist anymore. That's pretty much gone from most, if not all, mining companies now. But it was really a terrific way to understand what everyone else in the value chain was doing. And this became really obvious when we started to go through union rationalisation at Mount Isa. And we had rolling strikes. So the mine would go down, the concentrator had to go down, the smelter would go down, the concentrator had to go down. So we were sort of caught in the middle and really got to know exactly what the pain points were for all of our colleagues that we were working with, which was a really useful thing. However, for me, it was just such a disruptive environment. And I was the only female who was working in lead zinc in production. So there were females who were in the R&D department, but it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to keep my lead levels down. And the regulations were getting tighter and tighter. So much as I loved it up there, I ended up moving then into mineral sands. And I went to Stradbroke Island for the first sort of 4 or 5 years, but I was with Iluka and its various subsidiaries for 10 years. So I spent time on Stratty, at Pinkenba in the dry mill in Brisbane, over at Nangaloo, in Geraldton, down at Capel, Eneabba, and then the Murray Basin. So when I left Brisbane to, sort of went through various jobs and commissioned a number of different wet concentrators and dredges, and also got involved in tailings, which is something that I did get involved in very early as a graduate in ISA, but it was more a case of, congratulations, you're the metallurgist, you get to look after tailings. And of course, you don't learn about tailings at university. So it was coming very much from a point of not having much of an idea at all about what to do, apart from I knew we needed clean water to return to the concentrator. But when I got to Stratty, I did get more involved. And as we were moving into different deposits, the slimes level was increasing. And it became increasingly difficult for us to actually go, do the same mining method where we'd basically place the tailings after the dredge and just continue to move forward and rehab the sand dunes as we went forward. So at that point, I got involved in co-disposal of the sand and slimes with the tailings and using essentially flocculant, rheology modifier to get that process to actually work and get the required dewatering and be able to then get access onto the tailings to actually do the contouring and ultimately the rehab. And that sort of followed me then when I officially joined Iluka for the Murray Basin project in Victoria, which had significantly higher slime. So on Stratty, we were typically around 2%, and then it kind of went up to 5 and 7, at which point we needed to have a floating thickener at the back of the concentrator. But the Murray Basin was another thing again. It was 40 to 45% slimes, which we classified as minus 75 micron. So essentially the project rested on our ability to come up with a tailing strategy that would work. And that was no mean feat for that. So I did spend quite a few years undergoing lab scale, medium scale and pilot and full scale trials with that co-disposal. And some of that I did at Yoganup in the west near Capel. They were the large scale trials. And we did the medium scale piloting here in Adelaide down at Noongar, which was quite an interesting exercise. And it was there that I worked with the guys from Amdel who were doing the piloting for Iluka. During all of this time, I did meet my husband, and you can see up in the far right there, Chris and I on our wedding day, which was in Toowoomba. right in the middle of the drought. So I think that day was probably only about 35 degrees, but it was stinking hot, and there was virtually no grass at all. The funny part about that day was by this stage I was working for Amdel, and we were going through a bit of a sale process of the business, and I was actually doing a webinar on the day of my wedding. And I was joking to Chris that I would walk down the aisle, which was in a park, you know, with my laptop in tow in case I had to do any follow-up work. So it's Chris is the most patient man I know, and he is a mining engineer, so we do speak the same language. And I did meet him at Luca when I moved across to Perth. He is now with me. Actually, he moved to Adelaide first, and that was 17 years ago that we both moved to Adelaide. So just a couple of other pictures there. One of those is Escondida in Chile. I think one of the others is the Spence mine. So I went over there on a mission with the South Australian government and BHP back in 2007. And during that time, we were also looking at merger and acquisition with Amdel. So by that stage, I had joined Amdel and moved into my first real management position, and really got involved with the AusIMM Adelaide branch. Here is Megan Clark, who did the Essington Lewis lecture that year. I'm sure you all know who Essington Lewis is, essentially the grandfather of BHP. And that was the lecture that we had last night with Steve. We're 48 years now into the Essington Lewis lecture, and that was the 17th lecture in a row that I've actually run. And I'm now hanging up my flag and retiring from the committee. So we finished with the bang last night, but I've been fortunate to have some just extraordinary lecturers over that time. We've had Ian Plimer, Ziggy Switkowski, Laura Tyler, Derek Carter, Ian Gould, just trying to think, a whole boatload of amazing people. When I joined Amdel, that was when Western Mining was about to be taken over by BHP. And the brief I was given when I joined Amdel was pretty much to shut it down. So at that stage, we were owned by Gribbles Pathology, and they were not terribly interested in minerals. And then Healthscope bought Amdel, again, interested only in the pharmaceutical division and some of the other the pharma and the health side of the business. But then this little thing called the geometallurgy program for the Olympic Dam expansion came along, and I met Kathy Eric, who I believe is online there. Hi, Kathy. And that was back in 2005, so quite a long time ago now. And that just changed Amdel forever, really. We were then bought out by a private equity group, which allowed us to at least have some investment into the business. And we moved away from Theberton, where we'd historically been for most of we started out in Fruval, but we were in Theberton for decades, and built a new facility, custom built at Wingfield, which was much better suited to the business we had, which was 24/7 breaking rocks and doing geoanalytical work. So we had teams working around the clock on that Olympic Dam expansion, as well as other big projects, the Prominent Hill feasibility we worked on. We also did quite a lot of work in other uranium sites. Really, every major company was something was happening with Amdel. And we went on an acquisition spree as well and bought labs in Canada and the West as well. And ultimately sold the business to Bureau Veritas in 2008. at which point I decided I'd had enough of changing owners every 6 months. So I quietly departed. Well, not really quietly, but I did get out. And I started my own consulting business then. And I kind of had a life for the first time in a long time. I've gone forward too much there. So we put our travel shoes on and off we shot, and spent significant portion of the next year going to Egypt and Jordan, the UK. We cycled around Italy, climbed all the peaks across the UK and had a lot of fun. Went to New Zealand, Galapagos. This is not all in the same year. This is all sort of spaced out. And Chris and I both sort of worked for our business Metval, but we sort of dipped in and dipped out as it happened. And there'd be the odd mineral sands project that we'd work on together, and we'd bring in a tame geologist and a environmental engineer to help us with desktop reviews and things. But I also got involved in that time into graphite. Which at that time, graphite was quite new, and worked on a number of projects in Australia and also in Africa with graphite, and got into lithium and some other manganese, and uranium has always been there, always done a lot of work in uranium and radiation safety, and always tailings too. That's been another constant in my life. So we had a wonderful time doing that. One of our favourite destinations is volcanoes. So there's a couple. That's the one on Tanna, same one on the island of Tanna in Vanuatu. This one's the Wolf Volcano in Galapagos, and we were actually on the boat when that went off, and it was the first time in 70 years. This one here is Hawaii on top of Mauna Kea, which is a significant, it's about a 14-hour walk to the top and back for that one. But we've managed to find volcanoes all over the world. So some have been dormant and some have been very much alive. So we've got Vesuvius there, that's Mount Etna. That one is that's in New Zealand, and that's another one in Hawaii, which after we left there was about a year of major explosions, and a lot of the areas that we walked over when we were in Hawaii were under lava not long after we left. So yeah, there's just a couple more there. So that was all wonderful, and life sort of went on, and I was involved in the Adelaide branch of the AusIMM for the last 17 years, but then I kind of got a bit more involved on a national and international level, and was elected onto the board in 2012 and spent 10 years on the board, and 2 of those as president. So 2019 was my first year as president, and that was a year of much travel and visiting a lot of the branches across Australasia and overseas. So I made it to South America and Canada, the US, Hong Kong, and then India. And that was March 2020. When the world stopped and we all came home and went into lockdown. So the second year as president was very different for me and really hard, because being a member-based organisation, the thing that really you don't get a lot of joy out of being the president of the AusIMM, I must say. It's a voluntary role, and you can never keep everyone happy with 13,000 very diverse members. But the one thing that I always got a lot of joy out of was visiting the members, and I couldn't do that. So that was tough, but that was still a big part of my life. And it was the last sort of 4 years of the AusIMM when we started to roll out professional certificates. And I worked with David Williams to roll out the second lot. So the first one we did was the JORC JORC reporting course, which was kind of a no-brainer for the AusIMM, being one of the custodians of JORC. But the second one we did was tailings management, and that was really rewarding to get that course off. And I think there's probably been about now 10 or 12 intakes of that course. And I did that myself and graduated from that in the first year. And then I got involved in the ESG side of things. So I met Bruce Harvey, and we got together and set up an ESG social responsibility committee of the AusIMM, and we held some forums and developed some policy and a social responsibility framework, and also a new chartered professional discipline in social performance, which was the first of its kind globally, and I think it still is. I don't think any of the other institutions are doing anything similar, which surprises me. I actually would have thought they would have jumped on it by now. But I also got involved in the Global Minerals Professional Alliance, which is the peak body across sort of 8 different jurisdictions. So the South Africans, the South Americans, the North Americans, Canadians, UK, Ghana, and I've forgotten a couple, I think, but we all get together, and in 2019, after the Brumadinho tailings collapse in Brazil, we formed a group called the GATT, the Global Action on Tailings. So we've remained very active in that, and basically we have a portal where we bring together the best practice in tailings, and we worked with our colleagues at SME in the US to put together a tailings handbook, which has been very successful, and that was a real group effort to pull that together. And so we've got all of that. So all of these things, to boil down, have involved multiple disciplines, and that's something that I love about AusIMM, is that everyone's welcome if you're making a career in resources. There's a home for you at AusIMM. And I know there'll be a lot of people on this call who are AIG or GSA, and they're fantastic as well. And certainly on a South Australian level, we do a lot with the GSA and AIG. For that real deep dive into subject matter expertise in geology, geochemistry, they're really great as well. All professional associations, I think, deliver great value throughout your career, because I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. And whenever there's an opportunity to do something new, that's what I do. So I'm going to skip forward a few slides, because I told Jess that I'd only just done this today, and I did. So I'm going to go to space now. So this is something that I got involved in a few years ago, and it's another terrific example of we need everybody together to solve these problems. So a couple of weeks ago, and you'll see a few familiar faces there. There's Holly Cook, and she might be on the call today. Miles Davis there, who some of you may know. We did our Space Resources Fundamentals course at the University of Adelaide a couple of weeks ago, a 5-day course being predominantly run by John Colton there, who's the director of the Andy Thomas Space Resources Centre. And it was just a wonderful experience. Oh, and Elise Bosch, who some of you might know there, she's just finalising her geology and law degree, which at the time she said, oh, people are going to think I'm crazy. And I said, no, they won't. That's just a perfect combination of a degree. And it's now proving to be very much the case. So we studied modules in space law, space ethics, architecture, what else did we do? Psychology, the usual sort of hydraulics and propulsion and mechanical side. We did a whole boatload of modules, also agriculture. It was just absolutely fantastic. And the key message out of that was for every astronaut that goes into space, you need thousands of other people from other disciplines to help them get there. And if we are to establish colonies off Earth, which is the ultimate aim, we need people from all walks of life to be part of that journey. So we had a really diverse group of people there, and a number of these people actually came from overseas as well. From the US, there were a couple there from the US. Herdy Miyamoto came over from Japan. It was really a great thing. And yeah, just really consolidated that multidisciplinary approach is definitely the way to go. So I guess just thinking about that as well, we need to not only have different disciplines, but we also need to work with adjacent industries. So we need to work with defence, agriculture, forestry. There's a whole heap of other industries that have complementary skills for resources. And, advanced manufacturing, there are so many ways, so many different pathways that people can take to come into the resource sector. So I think there needs to be much more of a focus on upskilling and reskilling of people to show them that there is a career for them in resources. It's no surprise to anyone on this webinar that the industry has a reputational problem. And I'm hoping through, I've been an advocate for the sector for over 30 years, but I'll keep rattling away at that. I think we just need to keep having conversations about, I'll use Steve Hill's term from last night, how awesome we are as an industry, because we are, and we never talk about the awesome things that we do. All we hear about are the bad things that happen, and for every one bad thing, there'll be hundreds of good things. But of course, the media will always jump on the bad stuff. And, so I think it's incumbent on all of us to just keep telling those positive stories. For some reason, everyone's jumping over themselves to get into space, to get into the defence forces. These are industries that are dirtier and more dangerous than resources, yet people have no qualms about that. So, we need to promote the fact that we're a highly sophisticated sector that, is using the latest technologies, and it's not the old style sort of mining that people are used to. So, so a few cool things that have happened recently. This is last week in Sydney, and I did, my husband and I caught up with Jess for a cocktail or two in Sydney while we were there, which was wonderful to finally meet her face to face. But I was admitted as a fellow into the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, which was just a huge, wonderful honour for me. They don't very often take people, who are not professors or multiple professors or doctors or both. And certainly they don't have many people from the resources sector. So that was an amazing experience to be part of that group of 25 people who were brought into the academy this year. And I'll just come back to the importance of family as well. I think during COVID, we've all experienced a lot of some terrible things that have happened and people that we've lost and impacts that it's had on our life. My family got together maybe a month ago now for a family reunion. It's the first one we've had ever. So it's always ever been funerals generally, or the occasional wedding when we've gotten together. But we had our the 4 generations there, and that's my dad, who's the oldest of 9 children. One of his brothers died last year, but the rest of his siblings are all still with us. Then not everyone was able to come, but that's my generation there, which Dad decided he wanted to stay in. And we said, well, that's okay, Dad, you're the patriarch. And then he decided he would launch himself onto the ground in a model pose, which is just highly irregular for my dad, who's one of the shyest people I know. And then realised he actually couldn't get up. So it was quite hilarious. Dad's got Parkinson's and he's not very mobile, but somehow he managed to get in there and do that. So it was just a wonderful experience. And then we have the fourth generation here with my beautiful granddaughter Olivia. So there's my two beautiful granddaughters, and that was my 51st birthday this year. I was up in Woodgate with Bianca and Ben and her little family and mum and dad. So I think I'll probably end on that. Jess, I've kept no concept of time here, so I don't know how long I've been talking for. Is that about right for us?
No, this has been great. Thank you so much. This has been really, really good. I'm just going to everyone that's still sorry, an attendee, I'm just going to promote you up as panelists. So you're welcome to come on through. We'll start some discussions. You can jump off mute, have a chat with Janine directly. But yeah, that was really interesting. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
I probably should actually say what SEEK's about. I totally glossed over that. So SEEK is, it stands for Coalition for Eco-Efficient Comminution, but we're actually ditching that name now because we're about so much more than comminution now. And quite frankly, a lot of people don't know what comminution is. So that's where it started 11 years ago, but we're now focusing on all things reducing the footprint of the extraction of resources. So the next big project, which we're kicking off in earnest in the new year, but it's been sort of bubbling away for a few years, is on water. And we're finding a huge interest from industry in this topic. It's as a metallurgist, you know, you learn how to do, well, actually you don't these days, but in my day, you learned how to do a metals balance and you learn how to do a water balance in your concentrator. But after that, there's sort of no real accountability. It ends up in the tailings and no one really knows much that happens after that. So that'll be a key focus for this water initiative. We'll be actually examining what's happening once it leaves the plant and looking at various archetypal sites that will, it'll be a global effort. SEEK is a global organisation. And so we will have a collaboration between the University of British Columbia, the ICE in Chile, and SWMI out of the Sustainable Minerals Institute in Brisbane. And we'll also be drawing on some sites in Africa as well, so that we can get the arid sites, the water excess sites, the where we've got hypersaline water, where we've got acid mine drainage, and yeah, putting together a free tool for industry. So SEEK is a not-for-profit registered charity. So everything we do is open source. So all of our collaborators understand that when they come in, the IP is left at the door and we collaborate in a true sense, not just in a half-hearted sense. It's everything we do is then available for free, and that's what we did with the energy curves that we worked on about 6 years ago. Which are still being used by industry, and they're being kept up to date by the JKMRC. So we'll be looking to do something similar on the water side. And then the other one where we're working on the background is greenhouse gas emissions. So that's our brief. Whatever we can do to bring people together to promote best practice is what SEEK's all about.